For years, this was the kind of thing that was just a theory, something legal experts would debate. But on January 13th, 2026, it became very, very real. We're going to break down that unprecedented moment when a federal judge basically drew a line in the sand and sent a shockwave through the absolute foundations of Washington. Okay, so let's set the scene, because the date here is so important. January 13th, 2026. It's just after 5 p.m. Eastern Time. This isn't some distant historical event. This is a crisis that is unfolding right now, in our time. And the location, of course, is Washington, D.C., the nerve center of American power, where a single court filing, a single document, can literally change the trajectory of the entire nation in just a few hours. I mean, this quote from the initial reporting really just nails the feeling of that moment. This wasn't some slow burn, it was a sudden jolt. You can just imagine phones lighting up all over Capitol Hill, aides getting pulled out of meetings. This was the exact moment a theoretical possibility became a time-stamped, official, and very public act. So what really happened here? It is absolutely crucial to understand that this was not some anonymous leak. This wasn't a strategic whisper to a reporter. This was a sitting federal judge in public issuing a formal criminal referral about a former president and sending it directly to Congress. This has never happened before. A judge signing their name to a document and formally declaring that a line had been crossed. So what even is a judicial criminal referral? It's not a guilty verdict, not at all. The best way to think of it is like a formal handoff. It's a judge basically putting up their hands and saying, look, the problem I've been witnessing in my courtroom has now grown beyond my power to solve it. The evidence suggests a crisis that is so significant it might need a constitutional remedy, and the only people who can provide that is Congress. What really gets me is just how fast everything happened. This document didn't just land in an inbox and sit there for days. At 5 p.m., it's filed. By 7 p.m., we're talking just 2 hours later, the entire city's official status had shifted into what's called a contingency posture. That speed tells you everything you need to know. Leaders had been privately anticipating a moment just like this one, and their contingency plans were already on the shelf, ready to go. All right, so now let's actually look inside the message itself, because the judge's specific wording here is everything. It's precise, it's measured, and it is strategically designed to communicate a very specific kind of crisis. This is where the real story is. And this is the million-dollar question, isn't it? Why this and why now? I mean, this wasn't some quiet action taken at the end of a long career or after a long period of silence. No, this landed right in the middle of all these unfolding events, with other cases still active and political pressures just getting more and more intense. The timing itself is a message. And this right here, this is the whole game. The real power of this referral comes from its focus on repetition. The judge isn't flagging one mistake or a single bad call. No, they are pointing to a documented, ongoing pattern of behavior, actions that allegedly just kept happening, even after warnings, even after formal admonitions, even after penalties are handed down. The argument being made is that the persistence itself has become the threat to the entire judicial process. So you've got to understand, this referral is being presented as the absolute last resort. The judge carefully, methodically built a record. They showed that the court did what it was supposed to do. It acted incrementally. First, they tried clarifications. Then they restated the boundaries, just to be sure everyone was on the same page. Then they imposed actual penalties. The filing argues that every single one of these tools was used, and yet the pattern of noncompliance allegedly just continued. This step-by-step exhaustion of options is what gives the judge the legal and frankly the moral foundation to take this extraordinary final step. Now, this might be the single most critical strategic choice in the entire document. The judge frames this whole situation as an institutional failure. By deliberately avoiding political language and focusing on process and procedure, the judge is essentially saying this isn't about one person's ideology versus another's. This is about the actual machinery of justice breaking down. This wording provides a kind of political insulation for lawmakers, right? It lets them act not as partisans, but as defenders of a co-equal branch of government. It's really a masterful piece of legal and political framing. And that framing, it leads directly to this, what we're calling the constitutional handoff. See, this isn't just a document. It's a transfer of responsibility. The judiciary is formally passing the baton to the legislature, triggering a whole new process that moves out of the courtroom and into the halls of Congress. I mean, just stop and think about the gravity of that admission for a second. A federal judge is stating on the record that the power of the entire court system has been tested to its absolute limit, and it's no longer enough to fix the problem. It's a formal acknowledgement that when a court's authority depends on people complying with it, and that compliance is repeatedly withheld, its practical power just starts to fade. And here are the stakes just laid bare for everyone to see. This powerful quote from the filing isn't just about this one case. It's a warning about precedent. The judge is arguing that if this pattern of behavior is allowed to stand without a serious response from Congress, it sends a message to everyone that judicial orders can just be ignored by anyone who has enough power. The very stability of the judicial system is what's on the line. So let's kind of zoom out for a second, because this single referral didn't just start one fire, it started several, all at once. What we have now is a political crisis, a legal crisis, and a security crisis, all running on these parallel tracks, and each one is making the others go faster. So over on the political track, things are moving incredibly fast. You remember those impeachment articles that were drafted months ago just in case? Well, they're now being pulled out, reviewed, and adjusted. Lawmakers from really competitive districts who might have been hesitant before are now staring at a federal judge's formal findings, and these fast-track rules could mean a vote in just a few days, not weeks. The thinking here is that speed can actually contain the crisis before outside pressure can warp the whole process. Okay, but at the very same time, there's a completely separate legal track chugging along. The same bundle of evidence, we're talking transcripts, sworn declarations, court orders, has also been sent over to the Department of Justice. And this isn't just some random pile of paper. This is judicially reviewed documentation of alleged obstruction. It completely sharpens the focus for prosecutors and puts immense pressure on them to act, totally independent of whatever happens in Congress. So the response was immediate and defiant, a really forceful rejection of the court's authority. But here's the crazy paradox. That very reaction, which portrayed the whole process as a form of persecution, actually became more evidence. It mirrored the exact pattern of behavior the judge's filing described, which created this bizarre feedback loop for both Congress and for prosecutors. And you have to remember, this isn't just a DC story. The impact is rippling outward, far beyond Washington. Law enforcement is ramping up security at federal buildings. America's international allies are quietly making calls, asking about stability. Meanwhile, its adversaries are watching very closely, looking for any sign of vulnerability. And of course, the financial markets are reacting to all the uncertainty. This is that moment when a constitutional crisis stops being theoretical and starts affecting everyday life. So where does all of this leave us? Well, we're on what feels like an irreversible trajectory. A line has been drawn by a federal judge. That responsibility has been formally transferred. The machinery is in motion now, and there really is no emergency brake to freeze things in place. The timeline has now been compressed for months, down to mere days. This rapid pace is a really critical part of the story. It feels destabilizing because, well, it is. But if you look at it from the perspective of congressional leadership, that speed is strategic. It's a deliberate attempt to control the process, to try and reach some kind of resolution before public demonstrations or other escalations can derail it completely. So in this weird context, speed is actually being seen as a tool for stability, not for haste. So if you take away just one thing, it's this idea of convergence. This is what makes this moment so historically significant and, frankly, so unstable. We don't have a nice, neat, linear process anymore. We have the judicial, legislative, and prosecutorial systems all operating at the same time on the same set of facts. And each action just amplifies the others, creating this intense feedback loop of pressure and consequence. And that leaves all of us with a final, vital question. This is no longer about one person or one case. It has become a stress test of the entire American system. When the judiciary, the legislature, and the executive are all under this immense, simultaneous pressure, what does that reveal about their resilience, their limits, and their true underlying strength? That is what the coming days are ultimately going to determine.